you still have a great ability to think of this as a blank page and to draw whatever you want and put whatever you want in the appropriate places. Okay, so let's try to do that a little bit with Win, and then talk a little bit about what the consequences are. Now, we know that Win has been doing R&D in the U.S., and let's assume that it, in fact, employs a bunch of people, and yes, they want to continue living in the Seattle area. They don't want to move to Bermuda. So we have to live with the fact that those people are working in the United States and are working here. And let's say that there's been an operational decision made that that they want to have, or they already, maybe even already have, but let's say they have a manufacturing facility in Malaysia. So there's over here the manufacturing facility, and let's say that, which I think would probably be the case as well, under Malaysian practice, a Malaysian manufacturing company would have to be conducted within a Malaysian company. So we'll draw a box over here for our manufacturing company in Malaysia. Let's say we're, thinking about the example, there's a few different markets. There's markets in Asia generally, outside of China. And we said that they wanted to have an office in Singapore. I won't put a box around that yet. And we also said that there's going to be sales into China. So there will be a China, let's say, distribution group. And because China, although it's in the Chinese law, in practice they don't allow them. In other words, they don't allow branches of foreign companies in China. So we'll put a box around that. And further, in Europe, we want to have sales and, let's say, manufacturing specialists that are knowledgeable and will operate out of an office in the Netherlands. Office in Netherlands. Now, here we have the manufacturer in Malaysia, which is actually one that's owned by the Win Group. What do I mean by that? The Win Group actually owns the, let's say the building. They may or may not own the land. Maybe they have a long-term lease for the land, but let's say they own all the equipment. The employees are Win Group employees as opposed to unrelated parties. Now, what happens today in a lot of cases is that unrelated contract manufacturers are very often used. And I sent you some thoughts today by email regarding why that has, let's say, developed over the past 15 or 20 years. That I think European and U.S. multinationals have become more and more accustomed and comfortable with contract manufacturers who are not related. What's one of the things you might hear about now if you read the financial press? Well, there's, whether Apple is properly supervising its unrelated contract manufacturers regarding safety of the workers. Well, this isn't a tax issue. This is a reputational issue. Now, because thinking about the same thing from Wynn's standpoint here, Wynn may be manufacturing some of its products in Malaysia using its own facilities, but it also has a bunch of, let's say, a bunch of unrelated contract manufacturers in other locations, and they need to have some sort of supervision to make sure that what's manufactured is manufactured correctly. So there needs to be a group of people, which we're saying in this case is headquartered in the Netherlands and working out of the Netherlands, that will be doing this kind of thing. What is the biggest component of value if we look at Wynn's situation? It's making certain electronic products. I mean, whether you look at the electronics industry where technology is developing at an increasing pace, whether you look at the pharmaceutical industry where there's a tremendous amount of research to develop a new product, the intangible, once you develop it, is the item which allows, Apple to charge $500 for an iPad, even though maybe the manufactured cost might be, of course, just a small fraction of that. Anybody notice the, let's say, what the pricing of the Kindle was back when it was first out and what it is today?
Like 250 when it first came out, and now you get like 140.
That's correct on the what it is today, but I think when it first came out, it was closer to 400. Yeah, I mean, at that price, geez, why would I do something? But yeah, it starts to become a little bit more acceptable. But if there was that much ability to drop the price that much, you know that they were hoping to get a lot of return back from being the first on the block with, let's say, the technology of an e-reader. Now, actually, they weren't the first on the block. Sony was the first on the block. But Kindle's, Amazon with its Kindle somehow had a better marketing approach than Sony ever did on theirs. And I guess the combination of their having a bookstore that people are already coming to certainly helped a lot. This gets back to what we talked about before. In a multinational that has a number of different things, is the value of the whole more than the sum of the parts? And how does that affect transfer pricing? So in any case, this is a good example of how, yeah, the technology and their, in a sense, marketing intangibles were allowing them to charge a price and actually develop a business which, was not necessarily new, but it's the first time it was taken seriously by consumers. So the point of this discussion regarding intangibles and the fact that it's valuable gets us to the point that we were sort of talking about before when we were looking at our example of P and S. Well, gee, can we break up the intangible property in some way and have that really valuable intangible legitimately owned outside of the U.S. for exploitation outside of the U.S.? And the answer, of course, is yeah, we can write whatever agreements we want. And generally, they're respected. So yes, we can choose to set up a company which we said was in Bermuda, and I'm sorry, let's forget that company for a moment. We can set up a company in Switzerland. That's where we put it. And that company can purchase the technology from wind. Now, obviously, yes, we have an intercompany transfer pricing issue with regard to the purchase price. But the fact that we scratch our heads and say, how much should it be, shouldn't stop us. Now, the facts of the case, if I remember correctly, say that this company here in Switzerland is paying $5 billion for that technology. Switzerland is a new company. Where does it get $5 billion from? Part of it might be that. So yes, that's certainly a possibility. Now, the way that we set this up was that we made this a subsidiary of Bermuda, and we said that WIN capitalized Bermuda with equity and debt of $3.5 billion, and that a good part of that, let's say around $3 billion, came down to the Swiss company, and that $3 billion was, so to speak, a down payment for the technology. The additional $2 billion will be paid over some period of years. Now, is there a tax cost for WIN to sell this technology? Does WIN recognize taxable income today as a result of this? Yeah, there is a taxable event. And yes, it can cost some upfront tax money to get everything in place so that you then eventually have something that works, and over time will, of course, more than make up for this taxability we have today. The next thing we want to do is continue our discussion, which we started last week, regarding the WIN supply chain structure. And part of the purpose of this, again, was to attempt to understand how WIN will achieve two goals. We said those two goals were to, on the one hand, to avoid subpart F, and on the other hand, to keep foreign taxes as low as possible. So this area of supply chain planning has grown up over the past 15 to 20 years and has become a major part of the tax strategy of a lot of corporations. So where we were last week, we had pointed out, of course, that we're starting off with a blank sheet of paper. We said, of course, WIN, as the public company, the group, so to speak, will have to do three basic functions. There's, of course, more, but just focusing on three basic functions, which are the most important parts. R&D for the development of products, the actual manufacture of the products, either by a member of the WIN group, so to speak, or by third-party contract manufacturers. And then the distribution function, which again can be by members of the WIN group, or potentially, of course, by unrelated parties as well. And the drawing of this large circle with these three functions was meant to, again, demonstrate that there's a blank sheet of paper as to how you organize these things, how you decide to put a box around one function and where that box might be incorporated, what contractual relations there might be between the different boxes to achieve those two goals of no subpart F income, or at least minimizing that, and similarly minimizing foreign taxation. Now, this on this page, this is the page which we had been using for discussion last time. We said that we were starting to put boxes around some of these functions. And we put a box around the manufacturing function and said, for various business reasons, they decided to have a group-owned manufacturing facility with group employees in Malaysia. And we said that under Malaysian local rules and practice, this kind of operation would have to be inside a Malaysian company. So we put a box around it and we say that that's a Malaysian company. Now, this Malaysian company will be a company of a type that is an eligible entity for purposes of the check the box rules. So we know we have a choice as to whether it's treated as a corporation or as a partnership. I'm sorry, as a corporation or as a disregarded entity. Over here on the right, we said that there was activities in China regarding distribution of the product. And we said that, again, because of conditions in China, that would have to be a Chinese company. Could not be a branch of some non-Chinese company. So, again, we put a box around it. We indicate that it's a Chinese company. And, again, it's an eligible entity for purposes of the check the box rules. We also said there would be an office in Singapore. Singapore happens to be a place where, yes, it is easily possible to set up a branch of a foreign company. So in Singapore, we could have that operation, that office, be either a Singapore company or a branch of a U.S. company or a branch of some other company, incorporated in some other country. So that's totally at that's totally controllable by us. Local rules don't force you to use a local company. And we also said that there would be an office in the Netherlands, and that office in the Netherlands would have people in it who are, let's say, involved in various aspects of controlling the manufacturing. Certainly, to some extent, involved in distribution. And we said that the reason you need to have people like that who are involved in manufacturing is because not only are they manufacturing in Malaysia, but they are also manufacturing indirectly through unrelated contract manufacturers.